Hello, and thank you for joining me for Storytime with Mr. C. I am Mr. C, and welcome back to my regular listeners, and welcome to my new listeners. If you like what you hear, please go check out my other 18 episodes. Here on Storytime with Mr. C, I will be sharing stories that I have written, or a friend or family member has written, or maybe even something you have written. If you would like for me to share something you have written here on Storytime with Mr. C, please get your story or stories ready to go and shoot me an email at storytimewithmisterc@gmail.com. I have put that email down in the description for you. For now, I'm going to ask that you please keep your stories to a maximum of 2,000 words, and please keep them family-friendly. And maybe I will read something you have written on future episodes. As always, a big thank you goes out to my buddy Russ for helping me out with my intro music. Russ is the bassist for local band Drive By High Five. If you should get the opportunity to check them out here in the Tucson area or otherwise, you should do that because they put on a pretty good show. So check them out. It is time for my weekly shout out to Ben over at Chasing the Whimsy. And I was fortunate enough to spend some time with Ben and some of his family over the last couple of days. They were here in town for a convention, and I was able to attend one of their panels. We had some food together, which is always a pretty good time, and I just really enjoyed getting a chance to hang out with them and have some great conversations with all of them. So thank you to Ben, Megan, Kelly, and, of course, Spaghetti. It was awesome seeing you all, and I look forward to the next time. Please go check out Ben's podcast, Chasing the Whimsy. I've put the link to that podcast down in the description for you. Ben always puts on a good show along with some of the members of his family. And it's always pretty entertaining. So please go check that out and show Ben and his family folks some love. All right, last week I started up with our stories of the Matriarchs, and I shared the first story that was from my great-grandma Ida. Today I will be reading her next story, and I still have several more of her stories, so I figure we'll at least be spending the month of November with great-grandma Ida. All right, folks, enough babbling. Here we go with episode 19. Stand by.
Storytime with Mr. C. Storytime.
Thank you once again for joining me for this episode of Storytime with Mr. C. This is the second story from my Stories of the Matriarchs. This one is simply called Home, and it was written by my great-grandma Ida. When I think back to my childhood, my thoughts turn to home. For many years, that meant the Mills place, as we always called it. It was a big old rambling farmhouse without much paint on it and without a modern convenience. It was situated on quite a large farm 2.5 miles from Cumberland, Iowa, the nearest village. We were a poor family, and we grew up having to really count the pennies. The house was large, 2 bedrooms downstairs and 3 upstairs with a lot of other huge rooms, all in poor repair. At one time, the roof leaked so badly that we had to set pans around to catch the water when it rained. However, the landlord finally put on a new shingled roof, and the house was dry, at least. But oh, how cold those upstairs bedrooms used to be, colder than out of doors. I well remember how we children used to hate to leave the hot stove in winter to go to bed in those icy cold bedrooms. It is a wonder we stayed as healthy as we did. Maybe all that cold, fresh air that blew in around the doors and windows was good for us. However, it was home, even if it was just an old house badly in need of repair. In it, we felt protection and security. We had a lot of fun there, too, along with all the hard work and poverty. From the time I was 10 years old, the Spees family was 5 in number. Pa, Mother, Hank, Grace, and I. So many little incidents come to mind as I think over my childhood. I will try to write a few of them down for you. One is the time Hank was riding a horse on a slippery country road and fell down, breaking his leg. I recall Pa coming to the schoolhouse just as school was being dismissed and saying, "Henry just got his leg broken." How sorry we were. I began to cry and was scolded by Grace. We got our coats and hoods and climbed into the bobsled and went home. When we got there, the stove in the parlor was roaring hot, a bed had been moved down from upstairs, and the doctor had just left after setting Hank's leg. It seems to me now that he was in bed a long time. I know he suffered a lot for the first few days, but in a week or so he was as full of fun and tricks as ever. Once I came home from school, and he reached under his pillow and handed me a little parcel tied up with paper and string. I untied it and found another little parcel. I kept untying string and unwrapping paper until at last I just found a little wadded-up newspaper. Disappointed, I threw it on the floor. Then he reached under his pillow again and brought out another little parcel, which he handed to me and told me to unwrap. I was sort of mad by then and refused to unwrap any more until he said, "There is really something in this one." I unwrapped and unwrapped, coming at last to a half-dozen pieces of sugar candy, a sort of cream candy of which I was very fond. I was overjoyed to get it. It seems Pa, having an errand in town, brought back a sack of candy with him for Hank to console him for his suffering and having to stay in bed. A sack of candy was not an everyday thing in that household. One time, Mother received word of the death of a brother in Illinois, so she went there for a week or two, leaving Grace as chief cook and me as assistant when I was in the mood for work. I recall one evening when I was bustling about setting the table for supper. I hurried importantly to the cupboard, got out a saucer of butter, and dropped it on the floor where it spun around and landed right side up. Then I got a loaf of bread out of the bread box, dropped it on the floor in my hurry, and kicked it into the corner. How Pa did laugh at me. Grace was the one who was unlucky sometimes. Once a mouse ran up her sleeve as she reached into the cob basket to make a fire. She screamed and waved her arm around, and the poor little mouse flew out, hit the ceiling, and fell to the floor dead as a doornail. Another time she stood up on one of the kitchen chairs to comb her hair as she was not tall enough to see the mirror. They must have put that looking glass up high to accommodate the menfolk, I guess. Well, Mother used to put the milk into big tall cans and let the cream come up to the top for skimming to churn for butter. She had just brought out several tall cans of clabber milk from the storeroom and set them down in the kitchen. Unfortunately, she set one can behind the chair Grace was standing on combing her hair, and Grace stepped into that can clear up to her knees. She screamed and fell over, spilling the 3 gallons of sour milk all over the kitchen floor. She was as wet as if she had been taking a milk swim. Another time she fell over the coal pail when she was carrying a big wooden bowl of butter. She broke the bowl all to pieces and spilled the butter all over the floor. We had lots of good times together. Grace was a few years older than I and was considered much prettier. We used to fight, but Pa would look up over his glasses and stop his reading for a moment, and we would really pipe down. He didn't need to say a word, just gave us a stern look, and we were scared to death. Oh, those long winter evenings in the old home. We always raised a lot of popcorn. Hank was our official corn popper, and could he ever fix good popcorn? He would pop a whole dishpan full, put on a lot of butter and grease and salt, and we would eat until it was all gone. We had popcorn several evenings a week. We also used to make molasses or sorghum taffy. What fun it was to pull it and cut it up into long ropey pieces. It was sort of bitter stuff at best, but we liked it anyway and enjoyed making it. We also had parched sweet corn. I don't believe I've tasted parched sweet corn since I was a kid. I doubt if the children today even know what it is. We also gathered a lot of black walnuts and hazelnuts in the woods in the fall, and would sit around the table in the evenings with several old flat irons and hammers and crack and eat nuts. Our games and toys were few. We used to play with string, making a sort of cat's cradle and taking it off each other's hands. We made buzzes out of big buttons and string. I used to draw and cut out paper dolls and make scrapbooks. The Montgomery Ward and Sears catalogs were looked at over and over until they were nearly worn out with all the looking and wishing. Summertime was the best. What fun I used to have making playhouses in the grove and furnishing them with old boxes and broken dishes. I would wander up and down the country road looking for wildflowers to get a bouquet for Mother. Many a bunch of wildflowers and weeds was brought in and put in a glass of water. In the spring it was violets, bluebells, and cowslips. Later on it was red and white clover, sheep sorrel, Indian combs, and grass flowers. tiny white flowers that seemed to grow on blades of grass. In the fall, we picked goldenrod, purple and white wild asters, and other fall flowers. That old house on the Mills Place burned to the ground many years ago, and a new one was built. The big grove west of the house where we used to play is all gone. So are the apple trees. The outbuildings were all rebuilt, so the place looks entirely different from how it looked 50 years ago. The roads have all been cut down and graded and the wild flowers destroyed. So there's nothing left of my childhood home but memories. Some sad, some sweet, after the bittersweet fashions of life. Thank you so much for joining me for this 19th episode of Storytime with Mr. C. That was the second story from my Stories of the Matriarchs. It is called Home, and it was written by my great-grandma Ida back in 1949 when she decided to put these stories on paper for my mom and my uncle. Next week, on November 16th, we will continue with the Stories of the Matriarchs, and I will share the next story from my great-grandma Ida. In the meantime, send me some new material, go find Drive By High Five, and go check out Ben's podcast, Chasing the Whimsy. Thanks again for hanging out and listening to my story. Hope you come on back for the next one. Until then, take care. Be safe.